The gospel for today has concluded so well that God understands very well our human nature, and He does not need anyone to testify to Him about us. And that's why in this time of Lent, especially today, He is inviting us to return and be grounded in those basics of our faith that make us truly grounded in God. God saw it fit to give His commandments to the people of Israel, whom He was forming into a special community, a community of faith, a community of love. He knew very well that they were a weak people, and in the desert they had already shown they were wavering too soon, even after seeing the wonders He had done as He took them out of the land of Egypt. They immediately began harassing Moses for supplies, and the language of request was a bit mean. So He gives them commandments in order to help them be grounded in His heart, a heart of love, a heart that is patient. The 10 commandments that are given in the first reading are almost similar to the commandments that the neighboring people had. One thing was clearly different, that as God gives them, there are 3 elements that make them separated from the rest of the guidelines that Israel had. In the first place, as God reveals these commandments, He first reveals who He is. And He tells Moses and Israel that I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in these words, God is revealing Himself as a liberator, a protector, and defender of Israel, who progressively is leading His people into freedom. Freedom for God. And this is where the commandments of God lead us, to be freed in God. Secondly, these commandments address the individual person. The guidelines that were given by other societies were iffy. They said if anyone did such and such a thing, such will follow. God instead says, you shall not take my name in vain. You shall observe the Sabbath. You shall not steal, and everything is you. He is addressing me as an individual, meaning it is my responsibility. So in the commandments we have today, God is speaking to us individually because He knows us so well and would like to talk to our hearts individually as His children, the children He knows, the people He enters into dialogue personally, and the people He shows goodness personally. And lastly, these commandments are for all times, for all people, all generations. That's why we should take them seriously even today and use them as stepping stones that lead us into a greater future that help us to live with dignity, that help us to avoid wasting our lives, that help us to avoid even wasting the lives of others. And I assure you, these commandments are perfect, and they do not need to be edited at all. God gave them with full intent, and He would like every generation to live by them. And this is how He maintains us well grounded in the basics of our morality. The second reading, Paul is helping us to understand another basic of our faith. This is the cross. Whoever reflects on the life, sin hanging on the cross of our Lord, knows that there is love. It is love given for the salvation of all, and this love cannot leave us untouched. The Jews looked at it and did not make much sense out of it. They saw it as a scandal. The Greeks looked at this love and saw it as something foolish, not worthy priding in. But for those who are on the way to salvation, as St. Paul has said in the second reading, see it as the wisdom of God, a wisdom that leads us to glorification. So if we embrace this way of love, the sacrificial love, total self-giving, wisdom in God, total commitment to the commands of God, as our Lord said, that doing the will of my Father has become my food, then we shall be grounded in that wisdom that will make us a people in whom the heart of God is most pleased. And the gospel is telling us the third basic of the need to purify our religious commitments, beginning from the temple that is me. The temple needs to be maintained, tidied, clean, well maintained, and only occupied by God. When people went to Jerusalem for the Passover feast, we have heard in the gospel, many things happened outside the temple and even inside. As people entered into the temple, they were already distracted, and that distraction entered the temple to offer sacrifice. That's why we encourage people that as we enter the church, we maintain that silence. That helps us to allow God to talk to us and enter into dialogue with Him. That was lacking, and when Jesus saw it, He immediately acted, as we have heard in the gospel, to show them that what they were doing was off the basics. Off the basic of keeping the dignity of the temple, off the basics of maintaining their hearts quiet in order for God to speak to them, and of the basic of even practicing justice, because outside the temple, in the courtyard, people were shouting, traders were cheating, and thieves were there timing others to pickpocket, and everything was around within the vicinity of the temple. And worse still, religious leaders were just quiet because they were gaining out of the mess. And I think this is the problem still alive today. In the church, those who should speak about the mess happening are just quiet many times. And that's why we have these abuses disturbing us even today. God is telling us that in the church, there is no place for such. And if we provoke Him too much, beginning with religious leaders, if we provoke Him too much, God will fight for His freedom. because we cannot keep him a hostage in his house. He will whip us. This is not what I'm praying for, but God will whip us. This is what God did for those who are messing things up in the vicinity of the temple. So let's not wait for that harsh reminder. Let's convert, as Lent is inviting us to. Keep the commandments. These commandments are the guidelines that help us to keep our houses, the interior temples, clean. And if our temples are clean, God will come in, and from within out we shall act in a way that is dignified, a way that gives honor and praise to God, and we shall be of much help for the poor, for the sick, the underprivileged, the weak, and everyone that needs help, as the commandments tell us, that be good, show love to your neighbors. May God help us to return to the basics of faith, be empowered with the courage to practice them faithfully, and become a teaching moment in our witness for all our brothers and sisters. The Lord be with you.